Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out to join us for today's Help to Grow 4-day working week webinar, where we'll be discussing with two expert witnesses about whether the 4-day working week is right for your business. Just some housekeeping first. My name is Paul Corcoran. I'm the CEO of Agent, which is a brand and communications agency based up in the Northwest. We will be recording today's session, so do be aware that anything that you put in either the Q&A or the general chat will be transcribed and used for marketing quality purposes. Please do put your questions, if you have any questions for our two experts, in the Q&A chat only. We will only be responding to those. Any other comments or any other resources or any ideas or indeed anything you'd like to share, please do put that in the general chat. And there will be a feedback form that we'll be sharing at the end of the webinar. Again, that will be in the general chat. Like I said, my name is Paul Corcoran. I'm looking forward to a really frank and open and honest conversation today with two brilliant experts who've got two very different perspectives to share with you all today. As we know, 4-day working week is becoming a mainstay really as part of our working lives, and hopefully something we're going to be hearing and seeing and enjoying more of as we move throughout this year and next. But like I said, we've got two very interesting perspectives to share today. The first is that our expert witness is Dale Wellahan, who is the CEO of 4-day week global. We'll be sharing a global perspective about what 4-day working week looks like and what we can expect to see moving forward. And we're going to be listening to Dale and getting some insight and some intel from him. And then we'll be moving on to our second expert witness, Laura White from Whitefield. But if I can, I'm going to hand over now to Dale to give us his take on the 4-day working week, what we've seen so far, and what we can expect to see moving forward. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone for taking time out on your Friday to attend this session. I hope that it's of use to you. As Paul said, I'm CEO of 4-day week global. And what our main premise is that we're a not-for-profit, which is trying to shape a different type of future when it comes to the future of work, one that focuses on retipping the balance between human performance and potential and the type of an amount of work that we do. And I suppose, as Paul was saying, the conversation around a 4-day week has really exploded over the last 12 months. In many instances within the UK, that was due to the publication of our 6-month pilot of 60 companies within the UK, which received quite a lot of international media attention. We also know in the UK now at the moment that there's a lot of conversation around county councils trialling a 4-day week. The Scottish Government public sector is also going to be trialling a 4-day week at the beginning of this year. So really the conversation has exploded over the last 12 months, in many ways fueled by the production of data from global pilot studies. But how did we actually end up at this point of conversation where, 2 or 3 years ago, 4-day week was not a conversation we were having at all? And in many ways, 4-day week global have been driving the narrative by conducting global pilot studies. And that all started in one company called Perpetual Guardian, based out of Auckland. And the founders there, Andrew Barnes and Charlotte Lockhart, had found that human potential and productivity is quite limited in any given day. And actually there's a diminished return for effort when we actually continue to work longer hours. So a lot of it was basically saying we need to factor in more rest and recovery with the type of work that we're doing, which is a lot more cognitive and emotional now. The idea of the 5-day work week, obviously dating back as far as the Industrial Revolution, 100 years old, and in a very physically labored workforce, and not congruent with the type of work that we do in the 21st century. So the experiment was essentially to see if we changed the way people work, will productivity go up? But pivotal and of importance to many of you here today is we can't look at reducing working hours while compromising on some of the very key important things around customer service or profitability or productivity or whatever that means for you. So how do you essentially marry those sort of things? And we essentially launched as an entity at 4-Day Week Global back in 2019. And we've been running pilot studies across the globe over the last few years, trying to see how companies across the world would go about introducing a 4-day week. So we've had pilot launches in the US, in Ireland, in the UK. We've also just released findings from South Africa and from Portugal. And really now going into 2024, we have a significant amount of prospective pilot programs due to launch in a large amount of European countries, particularly in the Western European countries, as well as moving into Asia and into South America as well. We've just launched our first pilot in Brazil. So what we're really interested in understanding is, what does reduced working hours look like in different cultures, but also in different sectors, and being able to reuse that data and showcase to businesses and to societies that this is something that you can do, albeit it might be different to what happens in another country or in another profession. So we're a not-for-profit social business. So we use our business activities of pilot programs and consulting and courses to generate revenue to essentially spread the message about why a 4-day week works. And we partner with academic institutions in order to help us achieve that. And we use this framework, which has been very variably used by companies and in how they went about reducing their working hours, for 100% pay, 80% time for 100% output. And so we work with organizations to redesign pilots within their organization of a 4-day week using this. And some organizations will do, when you think of a 4-day week, the obvious: close office on a Friday or close office on a Monday. But that's not feasible for many other businesses. So what they've done is say, well, how can we look at reducing working time, but also maintaining service provision? So they might have some staff working Monday to Thursday, some working Tuesday to Friday. Other sectors haven't been able to close business whatsoever, so they've had to look at shortening their 5 working days to be equivalent to 80% of the time. And then in some sectors, we look at times where there might be peaks and troughs in the workload. And so they actually look at the 180-100 as a month-long endeavor or a quarterly long endeavor. So that's been really fascinating and helping us to build a case. Fundamental, I suppose, to what has been, I think, so successful to the conversation on a 4-day week to date is that the data that's being produced is objective. So it's not data that's collected by us as an organization, but actually through academic independence and rigor through our partners, particularly in the UK trial from Boston College and the University of Cambridge. So they're the ones essentially who are showing whether a 4-day week can work. 4-day week global, what we do is advise companies in a pre-trial kind of phase and then support them throughout the actual trial itself. One of the things we do as well is we realized that this is much more than just a human resource transformation or human capital intervention, but actually this is an opportunity to create a different type of leadership within organizations as well. And it really is a fundamental shift in culture that's required in order to get a 4-day week right. And we know culture is very hard to change. So one of the things that we invest in is actually kind of peer-led support and initiatives to try and build a community of organizational leaders across the globe who are bringing about 4-day weeks and what their experiences have been. And it's great to be able to share some of those kind of here today. As I mentioned, there is trials happening across the globe, or planned trials happening in the next 12 months. And our social aim is to create 1 million new years of free time. So this year you will see additional pilots coming from France, from Spain, Italy. Germany is just after kicking off with their pre-trial phase, Sweden and Norway and the Netherlands. So all very close proximity, obviously, to the United Kingdom. But beyond that, then we're also looking at trials happening quite a lot in Africa. So we had South Africa, and now we have interest from Namibia. From Brazil, we've also had interest from Chile. In the Middle East, we've had interest from Saudi Arabia and from the United Arab Emirates. And then Australasia has been probably the ones leading out in many of the conversation because the genesis, I suppose, of the idea coming from Perpetual Guardian, which is based out of Auckland. It's not by chance that that the 4-day week narrative has become so normalized now. It's because it is literally being talked about in every single media across the globe, nearly every single day. So I think it's important to take stock actually in how much this conversation has advanced in just 13 months. 4-day week global released the first set of data around the 4-day week trials just in November 2022. And over that 13-month period, we saw this huge growth in publication and narrative around a 4-day week. We've also seen the emergence of AI now, and how that's actually going to entangle around the time of conversation around working time as well. And what have those experiences of companies that have been on trials to date? Well, the majority of them have said that they would be continuing on with a trial, that they will be, that they rate the trial of a 4-day week quite favorably, that they want to continue, 96% of employees want to continue with the trial. The revenue across organizations on average grew throughout the 6-month pilot, albeit we realize that there is external factors there at play, but even our economists were able to do their magic and figure out that working time reduction and the changes that happen within organizations was contributing to that growth. Most importantly, I suppose, we see things like increase in recruitment and retention of staff. And most importantly, we see that reduction in burnout, which we know is now an unignorable issue for many business leaders within organizations, and the ripple effect that that then has on reporting levels of productivity and performance in organizations as being quite high. Specifically to the UK then, in that UK study, we had 71% reporting lower levels of burnout, and 91% of organizations continuing on beyond the 6-month mark. And what I should have clarified here is, for this 100%, this was for those companies at the 12-month mark. So we've just published some of our first 12-month data findings. So those companies that continued on past the 91%, 100% of them continue on past the 12-month mark. So again, significant reductions in attrition, revenue rising on average, lower levels of negative emotion, less stress, less sleep difficulties, and that better idea of work-life balance, which is ultimately what we're here to talk about today. More broadly, I think what we will be exploring as an organization over the next 12 months is the broader societal implications of reduced working time as well, because we're starting to see some data now that not by reducing working time, yes, we can make changes in organizations, but also we can look at other issues that societies are facing around gender equality, around the environment. As you can see there, the time spent parenting by men doubled throughout the trial in the UK study, and there was a reported of 36 minutes per person per week reductions in commuting as well throughout the UK trial. So potentially big ramifications there. So some of you may be here thinking today, a 4-day week will never work in our organization and we'd never be able to feasibly afford it. And I suppose in many organizations, it's about looking at it at a bit more of a macro level and understanding what some of your hidden costs are within your organization. And they may be things that you've had to significantly increase as a result of things like the war for talent or the Great Resignation. So things like recruitment of your staff, retention of your staff, institutional knowledge that's being lost, reducing staff absenteeism and sick leave. And then the growing issue that many organizations obviously have is burnout and the hidden costs associated with that. So as I mentioned, we're trying to create 1 million new years of free time. And so what we will endeavor to do is have 500,000 people working on a 4-day week in the next 2 years as part of our studies. And we do that by reducing our work week to 4 days. We're creating 1 free year of time every 5 years per person. So with about 7,050 people throughout our trials at the moment, we're currently generating about 141 years of new free time every week. But we're just getting started, and this is going to be, I think, the year of many more companies and larger companies trialing a 4-day week as well. So thank you again for the opportunity to be able to be here with you all today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Dale, thanks so much for that, and lots of really interesting perspectives for us to unpick as we kind of go through the webinar today. And before we move across to Laura for an SME perspective, I know Alex has put a question in the group, which I thought it would be timely to answer now, because he says, does this study differentiate between companies that work in an office all of the time, hybrid or remote? Do you have a level of kind of detail around that?
Yeah. So we do. So the academics collect that sort of data. The majority of companies, as you will find with many of these opt-in studies, tend to be those companies that are doing other future work initiatives. So hybrid and remote types of working are preferentially, seen within the data set. And the way we kind of see it and how organizations manage that is one of the key things organizations do when implementing a 4-day week is they say, okay, assuming office is closed on Friday, Thursday evening, our deliverables need to be provided. And we recognize that there's a need for a certain amount of individual work time and group work time in order to help us achieve those deliverables. So organizations work backwards then in carving out their working week to say, okay, if you're doing deep flow work on Mondays and Wednesday, we'll have you at home. And if you're in the office on Tuesdays, we're going to be much more deliberate about collaboration when we have you in the office.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dale. I know that there's a couple of extra questions that have come in there. I'm going to hold on those for a second because I'm keen to hear from Laura. I mean, Dale, you mentioned the importance of leadership. You mentioned the importance of embedding a really solid, forward-thinking, sustainable culture in organisations in order to be able to make this shift. And certainly, I can say from our perspective here at Agent, we've needed that really to help us drive this forward. Now we're going across to Laura, who epitomizes really what this is all about and shows real bravery and a real sense of energy and foresight in terms of making this work for her organisation. And so from an SME perspective, we're going to hear now from Laura White, CEO of Whitefield, to give her insight and intel on 4-day working week in her organisation. Over to you, Laura.
Fantastic, thank you. And hopefully you can see my screen. I've got a short kind of presentation just to run through. So as Paul said, my name's Laura and I am the Managing Director of an accountancy practice called Whitefield. So we are true essence of an SME. We have around 22 employees that work for us, and we started our kind of 4-day week journey a couple of years ago, actually. So we're quite far into it. So I've got lots of advice of what to do, what not to do, what's been good and what's been not so good. So I'm going to kind of over the next 10 minutes give a bit of a whistle-stop tour of our journey and how that started and where we are now, really. So 4-day week, as Dale said, loads of stats out there. It's already proving to be popular and actually be a huge success. It piqued our interest and came on our agenda as we came out the end of COVID. So as a completely office-based business, working a traditional 5-day week, all on computers, sat here all day, overnight when lockdown happened and we had to work from home, it just threw our business into a bit of a spin. As we came out the end of that and people started to come back into the office, we started to work together again. We wanted to try and take any positives we could from that time that we had spent apart, that time that we had to adapt, work flexibly, be apart from each other, learn how to support our peers and from different places, from our homes, from inside the office, from other ends of the room with screens up and masks on and all of those things. So we kind of made a list of the things that we thought were important, and people wanted to be back together. They wanted to be working with their colleagues. They didn't want to be completely remote working. They wanted to be sort of back in the swing of it. But what they did enjoy from having to work from home and have a little bit more flexibility was that extra time at home at the beginning and the end of the day or at lunchtime to kind of pop the washing on, do the life admin, and how actually they were finding that they were striking more of a balance between their work and life, and those weren't two separate things, and actually they were coexisting through that kind of forced environment that we had. So we began a consultation with our staff, and the 4-day week is kind of what came out at the end. But this was some of the main reasons of why we went into it. So productivity, there were already trials kind of coming through from larger companies. And now through Dale's research, there's some lots more SMEs like ourselves that that have their own data to back this up as well, to show around productivity. Retention, so replacing a single member of staff is costly to a business, especially to an SME. You can be looking around 20, 25, if not 30% of somebody's annual salary to place them into a role. So if you've got high turnover of staff retention is going to be something that's going to a tangible cost saving to your business. And it's care friendly. So young children, elderly parents, caring needs, providing flexibility and giving people a whole other day to do things that fit in with their lifestyle feels great as a business leader, and as an employee feels even better for them. For us, or for me as MD, there was a lot around innovation. We like to think that we're kind of pioneers for change for SMEs. We like to bang that drum and do things a little bit differently here. Why work how we've always worked? And picking on one of the stats that Dale did, which something that I often talk about, is that this 5-day week has been in place for over 100 years, like 100 years of working in this way. And when you think about what a household looked like 100 years ago, probably only one working person in a household, and the other person might be looking after children or looking after the home. And nowadays, both parents or both people within a household are working, and they're still trying to fit in all of those other things they were doing around working. So it's been a long time, and it's no wonder things like burnout are now coming to the forefront of business discussions, because we're working as hard as we were then, and putting everything else on top of ourselves, really. So challenging the norm is kind of where I like to see myself as a business leader. So 4-day week really did kind of pique my interest in that respect. There's lots of other stats as well around sustainability, so reducing footprint for commuting, people going out and getting lunch, reducing that carbon footprint, making savings, sickness, 1 in 4 sick days a result of overwork. So 4-day week reducing sickness, and again, loads and loads of stats to back this up that we could share. So our journey from kind of start to finish, and of course it will involve some costing. We're accountants, that's kind of where we base a lot of our decisions, start with the numbers. And I know that whenever I talk about this on a platform, the cost of it does tend to be one of the questions that people ask. And how do you remain profitable, and how do you keep your business going? Because ultimately for our business, we're accountants, so we charge for our time. We don't have a product to sell, it is our time. So overnight we cut our time that our staff had by 20%, and how are we going to find that kind of income or cost savings elsewhere? So we started with a consultation. We went out to the team and said, look, what might this look like for you guys? What are you thinking? What days would you like off? How would you fit your work in? Where can we be more streamlined as a business? So we got really granular into the detail. We looked at the things we were doing that weren't chargeable. We looked at the things we were doing that were maybe not as efficient as they could be, and that maybe needed like a little bit of a rejig. So we've got accountants that do work for people, and obviously their work can be charged. So the first thing we did was we took on 2 administrators, so 2 more admin staff. So those admin staff took everything away from the accountants that wasn't chargeable. So they were running around supporting them, making sure they had all the work they need, the documentation they need. They were supporting with answering the phones, dealing with the incoming and outgoing information into the firm, and taking lots of work off of their plate. So all of a sudden, our chargeable fee earners became even more chargeable, because they weren't using some of their time to be doing some of these more admin tasks. So that allowed us to therefore be billing out more to our clients. We then looked at cost savings, and one that I've already touched on around recruitment. So we are a growing business, and every time we recruit someone, if that's costing us £8,000 a time, £9,000 a time, you can see how expensive that is. So we felt that was going to be a cost saving for us. And actually throughout our 4-day week journey, we've employed 10 members of staff without needing to use a recruitment agent. So that is a tangible cost saving to our business, which ultimately we've been able to pass on in terms of an extra day at home for all of our staff. We then looked at communication. Communication was going to be key. How were we working? So we looked at where we were keeping our information on servers, how we were talking to each other, looked at platforms like Zoom, Teams, what could we be doing so that actually, whilst we were in the office together or whilst we were working remotely, we were as efficient as we could. So we weren't wasting time waiting for answers to come back. So there was a lot of internal processes that needed to be fine-tuned, needed to be talked about before we could just jump into this. And this consultation period to find out if we thought it would work and costing it out of what the actual financial impact to the business was going to be took us around 3 months. Once we decided that that was it, we were going to pull the plaster off, we were going to do the 4-day week, that was the decision. We then had a 3-month like kind of implementation phase where we worked out who was going to be off on what day. We worked out how that was going to be if they had someone that they directly supported either upwards or across to, how that was going to work. And we relayed the information to our clients. We let them know that actually the members of their team weren't going to be available as 5 days as they had been up until now. And so in our office, we're still open 5 days. So there's been no impact to the opening hours, but everybody only works 4 of those 5 days, and they're different. So they work the same every single week, but they all have different days, which means we don't have one day. So it's not like Fridays our office is shut. We just have a few less people here, which actually has helped as well with productivity because our office isn't so busy. We don't have so many people in here all at one time. There's more space in the car park. There's all sorts of little things that have actually we never really thought about, but as the journey's progressed over the last 2 years, lots of little benefits that have added on. Pre-announcement, some of the feedback we kind of went out to the team during the consultation phase, and these are the sorts of things that is why the team were really excited about us moving over to a 4-day week. So just having more time to themselves, not having to stretch themselves so thin across a day, waking up at 6 and you're not sitting down after dinner and everything done till 9 p.m, 10 p.m. at night, go to sleep and do the same again, kind of breaking out of that Groundhog Day and creating a bit of extra space for people. And then results for us, productivity is up through some of the cost saving measures and some of the changes to our processes that I explained. Our productivity is up. People do treat that day now as if it was one of their weekend days. It's a non-negotiable. That is their day off. As with anyone, okay, if I've got to work a Saturday, I probably could, but they don't want to work that extra day. So when they're trying to get everything wrapped up within the 4 days. And it was a little tricky at first. It took a while to get used to it, but now it's the norm. And all of us say we couldn't imagine having to go back to a 5-day week. Can't imagine how tiring it would be working 5 full days a week now that we've got used to having that to ourselves. Our profit is up. Believe it or not, we kept everyone's wages the same, but because the productivity is up, our business has grown as well because of this initiative. People want to come and use us because some of the comments we've had, which I'll share in a second, have been around, well, if that's how you're looking after your team, then you must be also looking after your clients. So for us, profitability is up. Sickness is down. We have the odd day here and there. Touch wood, haven't had any long-term sickness, and no sickness related to stress or burnout since we've had this 4-day week. Everybody's sort of firing on all cylinders, and they come in at the start of their working week and they feel rested and they feel ready. And morale is through the roof. It's an incredible place to work and this 4-day week has been pivotal in terms of the culture and job applications coming in, and in terms of how that's grown our business from a brand perspective and a wellbeing perspective. And we've won several awards in terms of employer of choice, best place to work. And a lot of it is down to this 4-day week initiative being the catalyst for that. This is some of the things that our clients said, feedback. And as a business owner, this was probably my biggest worry. Selfishly, my biggest worry was that the clients would think, well, how are you going to look after my business properly if you're only in 4 days? Or if you can afford to pay people 100% of their wage for 80% of the time, then maybe you're charging us too much. There was all of these things that I had in my own head that were rebuttals that were kind of holding me back personally. But after speaking to the team, I knew that I had to kind of get over it and give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? They could come back to me and we could discuss those questions. And I can hand on heart say that we've not had one negative piece of feedback from a client around us moving to a 4-day week. Quite the opposite. They love it. And I probably talk more to my clients now about 4-day week and how they can implement it into their business than I do about their accounts and the finances of their business. So it's completely shifted kind of what we do as well as a position, because we're trying to help people get that work-life balance back, and be able to implement the same sorts of things in their business. So just a few quotes of some of the things from the companies we've had. And then employee plans for extra day off. Again, things they do. We're based in Cornwall, so we're very lucky. We live in a very beautiful place of the world. Lots of them spend their time out then on the coast on their 4-day week. But some of the sort of special ones here, we had members of staff that were able to take their children out of nursery for a full day. So not only were the cost savings impacting us as a firm, they were directly impacting the employees. So they had one less day of travel costs, commuting costs, parking, and also nursery fees. And they were getting to spend some actually extra, really special time with their children, whilst still earning the same wage. So that's the end of mine. I know Paul's going to swing back with any questions, but hopefully I've been able to give a little bit of context into actually having to do it as a business owner. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Laura. I mean, you've already answered quite a few of them as part of your presentation. Alexander put in the chat how the clients responded, and obviously it's been really positive. Just in terms of any questions that are coming in, please do make sure that they do go into the Q&A chat, just not the general chat. That would be really useful. And I think you've answered as part of your presentation a question that Tony put in, which says around how you sell your time if you work in less hours when you are actually paying people 100% when you can only recover 80% revenue. And I think you talked through about how you were making sure that you were upping the productive time, the chargeable time, and reducing the kind of time that was spent doing non-fee earning work.
Yeah, exactly that. So as an example, say in an 8-hour day, someone pre-4-day week would maybe expect to spend an hour and a half of that day, 2 hours of non-chargeable time. So just all the little jobs they were doing, and everyone mucking in and answering the phones and doing things that weren't client related. So those members of staff took that. So now they're spending half an hour, if that, as non-chargeable time, because everything else is more streamlined for them. So we've been able to up the revenue within each individual person. So that's kind of how that's counteracted a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo those, when we brought in the 4-day working week back in spring 2022, and the costs that you talked about before, the recruitment, the retention, the marketing, all of those things were automatically removed, because actually you became a really, really desirable place for people to want to work. Yeah. So straight away, the fees are actually much more reflective of what you want to bring in, because you haven't got all of those hidden costs of recruitment and everything else that go.
Training a new member of staff. So you've paid to get somebody new in, and then they're spending 3 to 6 months training. So you're 6 months in before actually they're generating you any revenue. So when you start to get into that granular detail, it's actually quite terrifying how expensive it is to onboard new members of the team. So if you can do something that can remove that cost and that time and that energy to the benefit of everyone else, it feels, like a no-brainer.
And listen, I think when we've got accountants who are advocating and this way of working, then we're definitely on to something good. Listen, we've got a load of questions to get through. Thank you to everyone who's putting them forward. Chris has come on and said, do we regard a 4-day working week as 4 calendar days or 4 days worth of time? Perhaps you could give us a perspective on that, Dale.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different models of 4-day weeks out there, but certainly what we're advocating for is the reduction in working time, because that's what the evidence base is suggesting, is that people need to do a meaningful reduction in working time and try and tip the balance back on health and well-being. Interestingly, the Belgian government were probably one of the biggest proponents of the 4-day, 40-hour work week, and gave legislative rights for people to be able to request that, and have since backtracked on that, and are now trialing a 32-hour work week trial this year. So yeah, basically reduced working hours more so.
So the idea really is that, you know, it could be spread over, and it's about the hours that you do as opposed to days that you do them.
Yeah, because it's not so much the reduction in working hours alone that's going to radically transform your business. It's the changes, as Laura was saying, that you must employ in order to actually be able to achieve that reduction in working hours. And you're not going to achieve that by simply rejigging working time around from 5 to 4 days. The ugly issues that are hindering productivity in your organization are only going to rear their ugly head when you are forced to reflect inwards and say, well, what's stopping us from achieving 32 hours?
Brilliant, thank you. Kim and Alan, I've got a similar question around, does the research, or certainly you, Laura, when you're speaking to clients and partners, are you coming across any of those sectors or businesses who it just doesn't work for? You know, customer service, hospitality, you know, restaurants, hotels, that kind of thing. Is there anything there that you've seen, you know, those sectors who just can't make this change because of the nature of their business? Or can they also adopt some of the learning from what you've learned, either from a global perspective or indeed in your business? Come to you first, Laura.
Yeah, I mean, I completely acknowledge that there are going to be sectors that will be more difficult. This is going to be harder. One of the sectors that often feel the most challenge from maybe a sort of corporate responsibility is the charitable sector, where they rely heavily on donations, and then they're reducing the time that they're able to give to the charity, but still incurring those costs. So for charities, it seems to be difficult from that outward perspective of people looking at them. But it's hopefully people can start to recognise that it's for the good of the people that work in those organisations, rather than lining the pockets of anybody who might own those institutions. So, and there will be, from a customer service point of view, we are customer facing, we deal with clients, so we're still open for the same amount of time. It's just that not everybody is here for the amount of time we're open. So the same as any business, if you look at a retail shop, for example, I doubt there's anyone that's there for every single day that shop is open, for every single hour. They're going to have shifts. So it's reducing those shifts down. But I do acknowledge there will be sectors where it will be more difficult, and those conversations and those consultation periods might take a little bit longer, and that thinking might need to be slightly more outside of the box. But I really do think, even if you don't go the whole hog, there are changes you can make. You can start to look at, how do we make our working environment better for people, even if that's just small incremental changes at a time. You don't have to go the whole way.
It's interesting because I mean, earlier on we were talking, and in Dale's presentation, about leadership, and there's something about less but better. You know, and certainly to Alan's point around, you know, those work, you know, restaurants, hotels, hospitality, you know, a lot of those sectors are having real issues with retention, high turnovers of people. So when you've got really good people in, how do you keep them? And perhaps some of this learning, some of the changes that come with a 4-day working week way of thinking presents, you know, some of the answers to actually reducing the high turnover of staff.
Absolutely. And as you know, as Dale said, it's around the message and getting the message out there, so that then us as consumers can make choices. So if we were going to go out for dinner at one of those restaurants, making a choice to say, actually, I'm going to go here because I know that this restaurant really looks after the people that work for it, and I want to support them so that they can continue to do that. And we hear all the time around sort of manufacturing and ethical manufacturing. So if we start making choices to make purchases from places that are more ethical and that have more social responsibility. So we have a duty of care, not only as the employers, but flipping it onto the other side as the consumers, to start making our sort of spending or going and visiting places that are doing these sorts of things, because that's what will allow the organisations to do it.
And kind of moving on to Sarah Cox has come on and said, not the Sarah Cox, I'm well, I don't think she's got an H in her name. But what happens if an employee doesn't want to be part of it? Have you had any businesses that you've worked with, Dale, or you're aware of, where someone said, no, I actually want to work 5 days as opposed to 4? Or
yeah, and it's a really great question. I suppose the way we coordinate trials in such a way is that we provide the subject matter expertise, and then we allow and observe how companies actually go about doing their own 4-day weeks. And what we have seen is variation. So some companies will say, well, no, this is an all-in endeavor. It's a 6-month pilot, so we want everyone to try this and see whether it works. And then you see some other organizations saying, well, yes, you can opt in or you can opt out. And actually, if you're going to opt in, we want you to sign up to, putting your best foot forward for the endeavor as well. And if you're opting out, that you're aware that, everyone else is going to be doing this, and you're simply staying on there. You're still going to have to be involved in the changes in the organization from a productivity or process improvement point of view. So we have seen some variation, and I think as organizations mature and change in their 4-day week trials and flexible working and hybrid working models, we should hopefully, I think, be in a place in a few years' time where choice and autonomy over how you best work and where you best work is default, as opposed to now this situation where we can't tell how much control to give workers versus how much to control workers themselves. And I think depending on the culture of your organization, that's going to determine whether you want to have all your staff in or allow some not to partake.
Yeah, and I think one of the earlier questions as well was around part-time workers. And I suppose with working in this way, it means that it's more of a conversation, that actually you're listening to what people need and what people want and the needs of the business, and then coming up with solutions together, as opposed to, you work 9 to 5, you work Monday to Friday, you do this, you do that. Would you say that was reflective of how you work in Whitefield, Laura?
Yeah, absolutely. We acknowledge as well that there's going to be some parts of our journey as a business that will benefit employees maybe more than the business, and vice versa. And it's all about communication, continuing to have those conversations and working out. We are all office based, so our 4 days, everyone's in the office for those 4 days, but that was their choice. That was what they wanted to do. So they wanted to be in their team collaborating for 4 days. We're now at a point where we're saying, okay, we've done this now for nearly 2 years. Can we start talking about some hybrid working? What does that look like? And what might that look like for our team? So we're not at the end of our journey by any means. We're now going back to it, we're revisiting it and going, okay, this is working really well. What can we do to make it even better? Continuous improvements, just small steps all the time.
Brilliant. Alex and Sarah have said, is it the same 4 days for everybody in your business? Is it Mondays and Fridays, or can it be any day, Laura?
It can be any day. So people elect what day they want to have for whatever reason. And as long as that works, at sort of 22, 23 of us, we can sort of go down to even half the team. That's not too much of an issue. So everybody has their first choice. We've had people that have asked occasionally to swap it because they've got something going on, and that's okay. We didn't, for the first 6 months, we kept it really rigid, just to, as Dale said, allow us to really understand how the process was impacting our business. And as we've become a little bit braver and a bit more comfortable, we've brought in a bit more flexibility. So people can ask to change it, but it's generally, that's your day, and unless you kind of come to us and say, can I swap it, then it stays that day.
Yeah, we're very similar. We have ours are Mondays and Fridays, so people work Tuesday through Friday or Monday through Thursday. And internally, people can, they might go, actually, this week I want to do that. But everyone's an adult, so you have to be able to, to be able to work in that way for this to be able to work. Kim says, how do you measure profitability I'm coming to you for this one, definitely, Laura, because you're the numbers lead on, certainly on this call. How can it be measured for the team that are billable as opposed to the wider team?
So as we are accountants, we do track, and if there's any accountants or solicitors or sort of other professionals on the call, that this won't sound quite as shocking as it will to anyone who's not, but the norm is to track 6 minutes. So every 6 minutes is a unit. And so then there's 10 units in an hour. So then you're billing clients out at that. So we have such a great handle on exactly what's been done, what's going on. Our business has been around for almost 10 years. So we had 8 years of pre-4-day week data to reflect back on. So we can see very easy. We report at the end of each month what's happened, who's generated what days were they working. So being accountants, I guess we kind of have a bit of a head start in that, but we've been helping clients, lots of clients in lots of different sectors, map out that costing for themselves, forecasting, okay, let's just take that 20% off the top line. If you are a service-based industry, if you're manufacturing, it's a little bit trickier. Let's look at what 20% less time production would do. But if we've had printers, for example, just to give a quick example, who actually worked out that by buying a new machine, they could still get the same output, but with 80% of the staff time. So there is conversations to have, and some of those you might just need to think a little bit differently about. But I would really encourage anyone who to go and speak to their accountant, speak to the finance person, whether that's someone internally or externally or a friend or who's really good with numbers. Speak to them and look at it and map that out and be aware of what that change is going to be. Be aware of that impact. Don't go into it blindly hoping that, well, a lot of the data says productivity's up, so that should mean money's up. Do that really nasty forecasting exercise and have a good look under the bonnet, so you know what you're prepared for, because it might be that there is a drop. It might be that it is going to cost your business X amount to be able to implement this, but that might be okay. You might be okay with that and be comfortable with it. So I think the finance part of it is really important, so that you're comfortable with what that might look like to you. So yeah, do the numbers bit. And I'm not just saying that because I come from a numbers place. I just think it's
we're all in business, and inevitably it does come down to making sure that we can keep the lights on, making sure that we can put the heat on, and we can all pay our rents and mortgages each month. So the numbers are absolutely key, and being able to talk to and work with people who understand this space. So a little plug there for Whitefield. Speak to Laura. Help around that department. Dale, I'm going to come across to you now. Natasha said, do you have much data from startup businesses? So businesses who are just getting themselves started, anything that to share from that perspective?
Yeah, there is actually quite a lot of startup companies that would have been involved in trials, both 40-week trials and global trials to date. And many have actually gone on to create billion-dollar companies, particularly over in Asia. I'm thinking of 2 or 3 examples. And I think what I think is critical to that, and Laura alluded to it, is innovation is critical for a startup. So you can't create innovation within your organization if you are burned out in the first place. And we know that startups, already struggle with this surmountable amount of work that they have ahead of them. So in 4-day week trials, it's really about trying to eat the elephant in small pieces. So being much more deliberate about segmenting your work, evaluating priorities. I'm even thinking, because 4-day week global is a startup, and our own 4-day week intervention, we've doubled in size over the last year. We are across 6 continents, and there's all of those different, and we're all fully remote. So it is about being very clear on roles and responsibilities, success measures, evaluation of success, all of those really things that we kind of assume are being done, but my God, we're really bad at actually evaluating what good looks like, and what productivity looks like in our organization. So actually, it's probably the best way to start. It's probably the best place to start is at a startup, because it's going to create longer term kind of sustainability for your team.
And I'm going to come across now. Duncan puts on, I think this is a question for another day, because we could be here for the weekend talking about this one. Does a work-life balance always have to be 50-50? I mean, that is the million-dollar question. If you're starting up a business and you got the answer to that one, you're going to be a very rich person, indeed. But I mean, inevitably, I think we're all. You can probably hear from us. We're all advocates for this space, and we want to make sure that we all continue to work hard, but we're also living well. And I think that's really important. And whatever that living well looks like, hopefully the 4-day week or whatever interpretation that you take from it is gonna help you do that. Helen said, is it all or nothing, all staff 4 days, or just kind of be 5 days spread out? Again, I think Dale mentioned this before, around making sure that you are taking the ethos of the 4-day working week and translating it based on what your business and your team need. Sarah said, we're an event management business and sometimes require our people to be on site for a full week, for example, to deliver their events. What do you do about that? Dale, Laura, anything to share here?
Mainly from mine, I suppose it's that idea that, yeah, there will be some sectors where there is peaks and troughs and you might have staff in full time. And maybe that's actually written into the 4-day week trial that you have, is that we have 2 big events coming up, a year. So actually we'll have full time during those times. And that might be it. Or for others, it might be, yeah, if you're working beyond the 32 hours, we'll give you more time in lieu. You can take an additional day of leave throughout the year or whatever it is. I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in on the last question as well, you said, Paul, around the work-life balance, and you mentioned it, working smarter, not longer. And I think that 4-day week is essentially a psychological intervention to try and build intrinsic motivation of your workforce. And once your staff figure out how to become intrinsically motivated in the work that they do, that's just going to lead to exponential growth for your business. And the problem with the world of work at the moment is that we don't clearly define, as I said, what productivity looks like. So people are kind of languishing in the world of work, not knowing if they're doing a good job, and they're kind of spending long periods of time in work, communications and decision-making being delayed, and therefore they're not getting the effective recovery. So it becomes a bit of a spiral, whereas in a 4-day week, you're obviously being much more deliberate about what work you're doing. You can see outcomes much quicker. People feel good when they can close that loop, and then they have much more time off to rest and recover, much more akin to an elite athlete, perform well and then rest well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dale. I'm conscious of time, but we do have a couple more questions to get through. Lovely feedback there for Whitefield from Laura. Thanks for that, Laura. Being a client of Whitefield, I can say that we did not notice the change. It was managed and communicated to clients very well. We look at this company as directly the benefits to staff morale and culture of the business. I mean, that's exactly what it's all about, isn't it? About being able to communicate the value. And often we find in this space, there's an awful lot of myths around, the 4-day working week. If you work 4 days, you only get paid for 4 days. And I think going back to, Dale's presentation of 100% pay 80% of the time and 100% of output, really neatly and succinctly communicates what this is all about. Helen says, is there an optimum number of staff required within a business to be able to operate a 4-day working week effectively? For example, we are a small business with 6 staff.
I don't think
Dale?
so. But yeah, Dale will have all of that data. I think that, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been a small and medium enterprise led initiative to date. So in fact, there's a lot more agility in with larger organizations. The transition to reduced working hours is a lot more bureaucratic, and actually probably going from maybe 40 down to 38, down to 36, down to 34. It's a bit of a longer labor. So no, you're actually more primed to be able to do it.
I think coming back to a point that was made earlier on by both our expert witnesses is around bringing people together to get ideas from the team, because often this is not necessarily a top-down approach. It's about really collaborating, really understanding and taking ideas in order to be able to shape the direction and the way in which a 4-day working week looks like for your business, regardless of size and scale. So perhaps maybe bringing the 6 of you together and plotting and planning ways in which it could work for you might be interesting. And Duncan says, can all presenters confirm they only work 4 days at the pre-4-day week hours? I'm guessing that, I think that means, can we all confirm that we're only working 4-day working weeks for 32 hours a week? Laura?
Yes. So we moved down to 34 and then to 32. So we took kind of 2 steps in it. So yeah, I thought you meant me personally. Most weeks, if it's me personally as a business owner, sometimes it's more of a 5-day week than a 6-day week. But yeah, I try to also apply that to myself, but it is across the board.
Dale?
Yeah, we are. And again, the type of 4-day week is evolving nearly every few months as we grow and go into new markets. So we were all kind of Friday off originally, and now we have much more of a hybrid kind of flexible model. For me, I don't typically work Fridays, so actually I borrowed so I borrowed this time from Monday. I said I was going to give myself 2 more hours off. And again, because I work with Australia in the morning time and America in the evening time, my day might actually be long, but actually the time I'm working, so I take large periods of the day away from work to go to the gym or whatever, and that just meets my business's needs.
Brilliant, thanks, Dale. I mean, again, same as Laura, I've been running my business for 18 years and we've been doing 4-day working week. At the beginning, I was thinking this will be great for everybody else, but it won't really work for me. I've actually found that I am, it is really, it's essentialism, less but better. I'm taking myself out of things that I'm just not adding any value to. And therefore, I'm actually finding that I'm being able to get back time that I would have spent in meetings. I would have been looking over other things. I would have been, there. But did I need to be there? Definitely not. Okay, last question from Freya Randall, who says, do 32 hours a week include breaks, or is it 4 times 8-hour working weeks with breaks on top? Dale, do you want to answer that?
So it would include breaks normally. As in, we're not advocating for getting rid of your working break in the day, but whatever way you kind of pay, some organizations pay for breaks, some don't. So essentially, what your working day is 5 days, cutting off 1 day's equivalent, whatever that chargeable working time is.
And I think Alex asked a question, why feel work in different crossover days or same days? How does this work on overlaps? Laura, last answer from you.
Sorry, was that, do we work different days? Did you say?
And are Whitefield working different crossover days or same days? And how does this work on overlaps? Or is there a day when no one is working? For I think you said there's always some.
There is always someone. So when we did it originally, the team was actually only a team of around 15. So they chose their days and we split. So as a new starter comes on, we can basically say, what's the day that you want to have? And if that can fit in with what we've got. So if everybody said Friday, we'd be like, unfortunately, we're going to have to look at it. But so far, we've not come up against anyone that we've had to say, sorry, you can't have that day. But we just, as long as there's enough people here to answer the phone and help clients, then we can be pretty flexible. So yeah, there's not been any issues with that so far.
Thanks so much. I mean, it goes without saying thank you so much to Dale and so much to Laura for taking the time and speaking so candidly and openly and honestly about how the 4-day working week is working across the world, but certainly in brilliant businesses like yours, Laura, and really kind of spearheading and pioneering this new way of working. Thank you for your time. It's been really appreciated. Thanks for all the questions. There will be, Jade asked, will the recording be shared? It'll be on the Alumni Hub later on this afternoon. There'll be a link, there should be a link in the webinar chat for you to give us your feedback. Hopefully it's been useful. Hopefully you've taken some inspiration away for your own businesses. On the 9th of February, there's going to be a webinar on apprenticeships, and hopefully you'll get lots of value and lots of useful learning moving forward around what that looks like for your organisation. But it goes without saying, thanks so much again to you all for joining, for our brilliant expert panelists, for Aaliyah and for Sybil behind the scenes, making sure that everything has been working. And have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to see you again on another Help to Grow webinar very, very soon. Happy weekend, everybody. See you all soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you all.
Bye-bye.